Jax Donovan was used to working on Earth's biggest action films. He'd thrown himself off cliffs, rolled through explosions, and taken punches that looked real enough to make audiences gasp. With over a decade of stunt experience, he knew every trick in the book. But nothing could have prepared him for a job offer that came from beyond the stars. It started with an unusual email from an anonymous sender. Jax assumed it was a prank or some obscure fan message until he read the details. The Zithran Interstellar Entertainment Guild was requesting his assistance in coordinating stunts for their first galactic-scale action movie. They'd heard about human cinema through intercepted transmissions, and, captivated by Earth's action movies, they wanted to incorporate authentic stunts into their new project. At first, Jax thought it was too bizarre to be real. But within a few days, a sleek, unmarked ship showed up at his doorstep, along with a polite Zithran emissary who explained that they had come to take him to the production studio in the Zithra system. The emissary, who introduced himself as Kryn, had tall, elongated limbs, iridescent skin, and eyes that shimmered in an otherworldly hue. Jax quickly realized this wasn't a hoax. This was a ticket to make history. Within hours, Jax found himself on an interstellar ship, shooting through the galaxy at speeds he'd only dreamed about. He was in awe of the Zithrans' advanced technology, the silent hum of their hyperspeed engines, and the graceful way the ship maneuvered through space. Kryn explained that Zithran society had evolved far beyond Earth's, achieving levels of safety, efficiency, and order that minimized physical risks to nearly zero. When they reached the Zithran production hub, Jax's excitement turned to apprehension. The studio was more than just a production site. It was an entire city-sized space station orbiting a glittering blue planet. The buildings were tall, sleek, and curved, glistening under the light of a nearby star. Zithrans glided through the corridors in robes that shifted color with their emotions, an effect Jax found both beautiful and mildly unsettling. But what really threw him off was the caution in their movements. The Zithrans moved slowly, with careful, measured steps, almost as if they were afraid of tripping or bumping into things. His arrival created a buzz among the station's inhabitants. Jax was one of the first humans many of them had seen, and his mere presence seemed to fascinate them. The crew members whispered as he passed, casting curious glances his way. Kryn led him through a series of corridors, finally arriving at a vast room with a set that looked like a futuristic alien cityscape. High-tech holograms projected buildings and landscapes, and the set was dotted with prop spaceships and towering alien architecture. Then he met the director, a Zithran named Krill, tall and slender, with eyes that seemed to change color every few seconds. Krill exuded an intense energy. Krill shook Jax's hand with what he assumed was a Zithran gesture of respect, a soft touch of their long fingers to his forehead, and then launched into an enthusiastic explanation. "We are creating something entirely new," Krill explained, his voice like a soft whisper. "Our people have watched your films, especially your, what do you call them, action movies? We are fascinated by the way humans depict danger, challenge, and endurance. It's utterly alien to us. So, we want to capture that essence in our own project." Jax chuckled, still a bit dazed. "You're saying you want to bring human-style stunts to your movie?" "Precisely," Krill replied, eyes gleaming with excitement. "But we don't have any stunt professionals as you do. For us, physical risk is something to be avoided at all costs. We've had no need for stunts or physical training. That is where you come in, Mr. Donovan." Krill explained that the Zithrans had crafted an intricate storyline involving cosmic battles, daring rescues, and feats of bravery inspired by Earth's most popular action films. However, they were struggling to choreograph scenes with authentic movement and the physicality humans took for granted. Jax spent the first few days introducing the concept of basic stunts to the actors. The actors, all Zithrans, were nothing like the adrenaline-hungry stunt performers he was used to working with on Earth. They were reserved, even timid. Every time Jax demonstrated something as simple as a jump or a controlled fall, they reacted as if he were performing a life-risking act. When he rolled to the ground, got up, and brushed himself off casually, the actors gasped, some even covering their mouths in shock. One day, Jax decided to show them a basic fight sequence. He threw a light punch, stopping it inches from his partner's face, then spun to simulate a fall. When he got up, he noticed the Zithrans whispering excitedly. The rumor had already begun to spread that Jax possessed an extraordinary ability to survive physical trauma. Jax tried to laugh it off, explaining that what he did was mostly about technique and practice. "It's all about knowing your body, understanding angles, and practicing for years," he said. "It's not that I'm invincible. We humans just have ways of controlling our falls and knowing how to take a hit safely." The Zithran actors nodded politely, but he could tell they didn't fully understand. To them, it still seemed magical. As the days went on, their fascination with Jax only grew. Every time he demonstrated a new stunt, they observed with wide eyes and hushed awe. When he jumped from a platform, he noticed several crew members looked away, as if preparing for the worst. When he rolled out of a simulated explosion, dusting himself off afterward, a crowd of onlookers began murmuring in their alien dialects, casting him glances filled with reverence. One afternoon, after he demonstrated a particularly elaborate fall involving a flip and a controlled roll, one of the younger actors timidly approached him. "Mr. Donovan," the actor said, his large iridescent eyes blinking slowly. "Is it true that all humans can survive such feats with ease?" Jax laughed. "Not exactly. I've trained for years. It's all about knowing how to fall and break your impacts safely." The actor tilted his head. "So, you mean that if a human were to, say, leap from a spaceship in flight, they might survive?" Jax could hardly believe the question. He explained as patiently as he could that no human could survive an unassisted leap from a spaceship without severe injury. But he could tell his words were only partially sinking in. The Zithran's fascination with his abilities seemed to deepen. By the end of his first month, Jax was a local celebrity on the station. Zithrans from other departments stopped him in the corridors, whispering about his feats and asking if he could demonstrate his strength. To them, his stunts were proof of something nearly mystical. He overheard a rumor circulating among the crew that human resilience might be connected to Earth's unique gravitational fields, or that humans had evolved to withstand inhospitable environments on their planet. The final straw came during a meeting with Krill and the production heads to discuss the climax of the movie. The scene was an intense chase through a crumbling spaceship with explosions and falling debris, ending in a desperate jump through an airlock. Krill wanted Jax to perform the jump in real time, without wires or green screens, and land directly on the metal platform below. Jax chuckled, assuming it was a joke. "I'd break every bone in my body if I tried that without safety gear. We can set up some wires and make it look real without actually risking my life." Krill's expression turned serious. "But isn't that what makes you unique? Your people survived so many challenges that other species could not. Surely you could land safely. Our actors have seen you fall from high places and rise unharmed." Jax finally understood. The Zithrans truly believed that he, like all humans, possessed some kind of superhuman durability. In their eyes, his stunts were no longer just trained maneuvers. They were evidence of an indestructible physiology. It was a myth that had grown wildly out of proportion. Realizing he needed to set the record straight, Jax gave an impromptu lesson to the entire crew, explaining how stunt work was a blend of science, timing, and years of conditioning. He demonstrated basic rolls and falls, and carefully explained the role of Earth's stunt training. But even as he clarified, he could tell that the Zithrans didn't fully understand. For a culture that had evolved away from physical risks, the concept of intentionally putting oneself in harm's way, even for training, was incomprehensible. Over time, however, Jax began to enjoy his newfound reputation. He found himself playing into the myth, just a little, winking after particularly daring stunts, or brushing off falls with dramatic flair. He could sense the Zithran's fascination only deepening, and, to be honest, he loved the attention. Inwardly, he couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Here he was, just a regular human stuntman, but to these aliens, he was a near mythical figure, an immortal with abilities they could barely fathom. Little did he know, the legend of the indestructible. A month into the project, Jax Donovan had become an outright legend on the Zithran station. The rumors had reached levels that he could never have predicted. And now it seemed like everyone on the station, from actors to engineers to maintenance workers, was talking about the indestructible human. No matter how many times Jax tried to explain the realities of stunt work, his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The Zithrans were convinced he was different from them, some kind of rare super being from a distant planet. Every time he demonstrated a new stunt, they watched with wide, astonished eyes, and every new move seemed to add to his mythical status. And as the scenes became more intense, the Zithran production crew started expecting more and more daring stunts from him. One day, during a routine scene involving a simple fight sequence, Jax threw a basic roll to the ground. When he popped up afterward with a quick grin, he noticed his Zithran co-stars staring at him with slack-jawed awe. One of them, a younger actor named Thara, gasped and whispered, "The tales of your resilience, they are true." Jax chuckled and shrugged, trying once again to explain. "It's really just training and practice. Trust me, I'm as breakable as anyone else. This is all carefully calculated so I don't actually get hurt." But his words seemed lost on them. In their eyes, he had walked away from falls and hits that would have left his Zithran bedridden for days. They were beginning to view his feats as proof of humanity's supposed invincibility. The idea was absurd, but Jax couldn't deny that it was a bit flattering. He was a normal human, but here he was elevated to some kind of superhuman status among these aliens. Over time, this fascination led the Zithrans to make increasingly unrealistic demands. They began to request scenes that even Earth's most seasoned stunt actors would balk at, convinced that Jax's unique human durability could handle it. The final straw came during a meeting with the director, Krill, to discuss a climactic scene. The scene was ambitious, even by human standards, a daring escape from an exploding spaceship. The sequence involved an intense chase through crumbling corridors, flames bursting from damaged conduits, and a death-defying leap through an airlock. Krill was absolutely enthralled by the concept. "We have studied human films carefully," Krill explained, leaning forward with barely restrained excitement. "We believe that we can create a scene that truly captures your people's durability. In this sequence, you would jump from the main level down to the lower platform, directly through the explosion." Jax laughed, thinking Krill was joking. But Krill's face was serious, and when Jax looked around the room, he saw that the other Zithrans were also nodding with enthusiastic agreement. "Krill, if I actually jumped through an explosion without any wires, I'd be a human pancake," Jax said, trying to keep his tone light. "We'd need a harness or CGI effects to make that happen safely." Krill's face fell, and his shimmering skin took on a darker hue. Something Jax had learned indicated disappointment. "But Mr. Donovan, we have witnessed you performing stunts that defy the limits of other species. Surely, this jump would be no challenge for you." "I get it, I do," Jax said, attempting to explain. "I look like I'm surviving all these crazy things, but it's only because of practice and the right precautions. You don't see the crew setting up all the safety mats and cables because we hide it from the cameras." But it was clear that his words weren't reaching them. To the Zithrans, his previous stunts had been evidence of a level of resilience they couldn't comprehend. As far as they were concerned, Jax's words were just a formality, an act of modesty, perhaps. After all, they had already seen him do things that they believed were impossible. So, why wouldn't he be able to survive a leap through an explosion? Krill sighed, his eyes shimmering with a mix of frustration and reverence. "Mr. Donovan, we Zithrans do not possess your people's gift for resilience. But we believe that with your guidance, we can create a scene that will inspire the entire galaxy. We need you to show the world what humans are truly capable of." Jax looked at Krill, realizing that he was not just asking for a stunt. He was asking for something almost spiritual. The Zithrans had begun to believe in Jax as a symbol of humanity's strength. They wanted to show the universe that humans could conquer any challenge, endure any hardship. But Jax knew he couldn't give them what they wanted, at least not without serious risk. He had a job to do, but he wasn't about to die for it. "Look, Krill, I get what you're trying to do here, but I think we can pull off the same scene with some good old-fashioned special effects. Let me show you how we do it on Earth." Reluctantly, Krill agreed, and Jack spent the rest of the day walking the crew through Earth's techniques for simulating danger. He demonstrated the use of crash mats, fake glass, and wire rigs to create the illusion of impossible feats. He showed them how quick cuts and clever angles could make a 10-foot jump look like a 20-foot plunge. The Zithrans were fascinated but still skeptical. They watched as Jack set up the rigging and rehearsed the scene with carefully choreographed moves, making it look effortless and real. When the cameras rolled, he leapt through a series of controlled explosions with wires guiding his fall, landing smoothly on a hidden crash pad. The scene was flawless, capturing all the drama and danger without any actual risk. But when the Zithrans reviewed the footage, their reactions were mixed. They had hoped for something more authentic, something that would prove humanity's unique endurance. As the days went on, Jax realized that no matter how many times he explained Earth's safety protocols, the myth of his indestructibility continued to grow. Crew members approached him to ask if humans could really regenerate from severe injuries or function without oxygen for extended periods. A few even asked if he could show them light sparring techniques from Earth. The culmination of these misunderstandings happened one evening in the crew's mess hall, where Jax was eating alone when a group of young Zithrans approached him hesitantly. The leader of the group, a young technician named Eller, spoke up. "Mr. Donovan," Eller said, his voice filled with awe, "is it true that humans can withstand vacuum exposure without harm?" Jax almost choked on his food. "What? No, definitely not. We're just as vulnerable to space as anyone else. But we've seen you endure things that we would never survive," Eller insisted. "Surely, vacuum is just another level of challenge for your people?" Jax shook his head, laughing. "Look, I promise you, we're not invincible. We just train a lot and know how to fall without hurting ourselves. Believe me, if you threw me into open space without a suit, I'd be gone in seconds." Eller's expression softened, but he still looked doubtful. "I see. Perhaps our expectations were simply too high." The encounter left Jax feeling a strange mix of amusement and exasperation. He'd come to the Zithran station expecting to teach a few stunts, but instead, he'd accidentally become a legendary figure. Everywhere he went, people stopped him to ask about humanity's remarkable resilience. And no matter how many times he debunked the myths, the legend only seemed to grow. One day, he caught a rumor that the crew had secretly nicknamed him the Unbreakable One. It was a title that he found both flattering and absurd. But he didn't have the heart to correct them anymore. Somehow, his role as a stunt coordinator had morphed into something far beyond the job description. He was now a symbol of human strength and bravery, at least in the eyes of the Zithrans. And in the end, he couldn't deny that he enjoyed it. By the time the film's final scenes were scheduled, Jax Donovan's reputation had transformed him into a living legend on the Zithran production station. Everywhere he went, Zithrans gazed at him with admiration and whispered about his remarkable resilience and unbreakable nature. Despite his best efforts to explain Earth's safety protocols, choreography, and special effects, the myth of human invincibility continued to grow. The final scenes of the movie were slated to be the most ambitious, a massive space battle and a daring escape sequence that would push the limits of Zithran filmmaking and of Jax's own stunt expertise. The scenes required elaborate special effects, simulated explosions, and intense choreography. Jax had spent weeks preparing the Zithran actors, but their cautious nature made it difficult to replicate the energy and risk-taking that Earth's stunt performers brought to similar scenes. They hesitated at even basic stunts, and most were visibly nervous around the props and effects. The grand finale involved a sequence where the hero, played by one of the Zithran actors, would be pursued by enemy ships through a crumbling spaceship, dodging laser blasts and explosions, before leaping out of the hull into the vacuum of space. When Jax first reviewed the script, he assumed the leap would be done with CGI or special effects. But, as he was soon to learn, the Zithrans had something else in mind. One afternoon, as Jax was going over safety protocols for the scene, Krill approached him with a serious expression. "Mr. Donovan," Krill began, his iridescent eyes reflecting shades of anticipation. "We have discussed it, and we believe the final sequence would be far more powerful if performed by you live. Jax blinked, sure he had misheard. Wait, you want me to perform the final leap? Into space? Krill nodded, his expression calm but intense. Yes, our actors are not capable of performing such stunts. You, however, are the unbreakable one. Jax stifled a laugh, assuming it was some sort of Zithran joke. But Krill's face remained solemn. Krill, you can't be serious. Humans aren't immune to space. If I jumped out of a spaceship without protection, I'd suffocate in seconds. Not to mention the whole no-gravity thing. Krill frowned, as if trying to process this information. But we have all seen you withstand impacts, heat, and falls that would incapacitate any Zithran. Surely, a brief exposure to space would not harm you. The enormity of the misunderstanding hit Jax like a truck. The Zithrans truly believed that he could withstand the vacuum of space, even if only for a few seconds. They thought he was capable of surviving things that no human, or any other species for that matter, could survive. The title, Unbreakable One, had taken on an entirely literal meaning in their minds. Krill, Jax said, choosing his words carefully, look, I'm just as vulnerable to space as anyone else. I can't survive out there without a suit. And the stunts I do? They're carefully planned with safety measures. I'm not immortal, not even close. Krill looked genuinely disappointed, his shimmering skin turning a darker shade. I see. We had hoped to create something legendary, an act that would showcase the resilience of humanity. But if you are unwilling— It's not that I'm unwilling, Jax interrupted. It's just impossible. But I have an idea. What if we simulate the leap? I'll show you how to use effects and rigging to make it look like I'm actually doing it. I promise you, it'll look just as real, and I'll walk away in one piece. Krill hesitated, considering Jax's offer. Finally, he nodded. If you believe this will achieve the desired effect, then we will defer to your expertise. Relieved, Jax set to work designing the simulated sequence. He created an intricate setup involving wires, green screens, and timed explosions, explaining each step to the Zithran crew as they watched with a mixture of awe and skepticism. To ensure everything looked authentic, he choreographed the entire scene down to the last detail, rehearsing the jumps and rolls while suspended on cables. On the day of the shoot, Jax's heart raced as he suited up. Despite his confidence, he knew this was going to be one of the most challenging stunts he'd ever attempted. Everything had to go perfectly. The timing of the explosions, the positioning of the cables, and the synchronization of his movements with the CGI background. As the cameras rolled, Jax sprinted through the set, dodging simulated laser blasts and tumbling through explosions that flared to life on cue. He felt the rush of adrenaline as he ducked, rolled, and leapt, his body moving almost instinctively. When he reached the airlock edge, he made the final leap, flinging himself through a sea of sparks as the wire cables guided his descent toward the lower platform. With a carefully controlled roll, he landed smoothly and sprang to his feet, giving the camera a triumphant look. The scene was flawless. As the crew reviewed the footage, their expressions were filled with awe. Krill's skin glowed a vibrant shade of blue, a Zithran sign of intense admiration. He turned to Jax, his eyes wide with respect. Mr. Donovan, he said softly, that was remarkable. I see now that perhaps humanity's strength is not in your physical abilities, but in your courage to face what others would fear. Jax grinned, relieved that they finally understood. Exactly. It's about making things look dangerous, not actually risking our lives. But even as he said it, he realized that his words were only partially sinking in. The crew was still marveling at the stunts, muttering among themselves. A few of them looked at Jax as if he had just performed a miracle. Once the final scene was wrapped, the Zithran crew threw an elaborate celebration in Jax's honor. Word had spread quickly, and people from all departments gathered to congratulate him. They presented him with a ceremonial robe, which shimmered in hues of silver and blue, the traditional colors of Zithran respect and admiration. They even held a ceremony where they officially titled him the Unbreakable One. Standing before the crowd, Jax gave a small speech, trying one last time to dispel the myths surrounding his indestructibility. He explained how humans use training, practice, and a bit of luck to pull off their stunts, emphasizing that he wasn't immune to injury or death. But when he looked at the audience, he realized it was no use. The Zithrans had already decided who he was in their minds. To them, Jax would always be the unbreakable one, the human who had come from a world of chaos to show them a new way of understanding courage. And if he was honest with himself, Jax didn't entirely mind. As the celebration wound down, Krill approached him with a parting gift, a small holographic projector that displayed the footage of his final stunt, a reminder of the legacy he had left with the Zithrans. "Mr. Donovan," Krill said, his voice filled with admiration, "you have shown us things we thought impossible. Your bravery will be remembered long after this project is complete." Jax chuckled, pocketing the projector. "I'm just a regular guy who does a few fancy tricks, Krill. But hey, if it inspires you, then I guess I've done my job." As Jax prepared to return to Earth, he reflected on his time with the Zithrans. What had started as a simple job had turned into something much bigger, something that had left an impact on an entire alien culture. For the Zithrans, he was more than a stuntman. He was a symbol of resilience, courage, and the relentless human spirit. When he finally boarded the ship home, he couldn't help but smile at the irony. He was just an ordinary human, but to the Zithrans, he was extraordinary. And perhaps, in some small way, that belief would help the Zithrans see the world a bit differently, take a few more risks, and find their own courage. As the stars stretched out before him, Jax leaned back and chuckled to himself, thinking of all the ways he'd try to explain this story to his friends back on Earth. He'd gone to the stars to teach a few stunts, and he'd come back as a legend.